Hey everyone, in this video we're going to take a look at William Clifford's The Ethics of Belief and consider its applicability to engineering ethics. Let's take a look at William Clifford's The Ethics of Belief and start here right at the beginning in section 1. And what Clifford does here is he provides us with two stories. Let's take a look at the first story, which you'll see in the first paragraph. A shipowner was about to send to sea an emigrant ship. He knew that she was old and not over well built at the first, that she had seen many seas and climes and often had needed repairs. Doubts had been suggested to him that possibly she was not seaworthy. These doubts preyed upon his mind and made him unhappy. He thought that perhaps he ought to have her thoroughly overhauled and refitted, even though this should put him to great expense. Before the ship sailed, however, he succeeded in overcoming these melancholy reflections. He said to himself that she had gone safely through so many voyages and weathered so many storms that it was idle to suppose that she would not come safely home from this trip also. He would put his trust in Providence, which could hardly fail to protect all these unhappy families that were leaving their fatherland to seek better times elsewhere. He would dismiss from his mind all ungenerous suspicions about the honesty of builders and contractors. In such ways, he acquired a sincere and comfortable conviction that his vessel was thoroughly safe and seaworthy. He watched her departure with a light heart and benevolent wishes for the success of the exiles in their strange new home that was to be. And he got his insurance money when she went down in mid-ocean and told no tales. Alright, so let's go just through the first paragraph a bit and break this down. So, first of all, we've got the first line here. So, someone's about to send out a ship. It's an emigrant ship, which means it's carrying immigrants from one country to another. It's got people on it. It's not just merely cargo. It's not automated. So, and this piece was written in the 19th century, so we can easily picture a 19th century ship. And it's an old ship. It says it's old, not great, not over well built in the first place. So it's not like it started out as some sort of amazing ship to begin with. It's always been mediocre at best, and it's made a lot of trips, and it's often needed repairs. So we've got that. Next component. Even the owner of the ship knows that the ship has problems. Doubts had been suggested to him. Maybe this isn't the best ship. Maybe it needs not just some repairs, but maybe it needs to be retired. And it says these doubts preyed upon his mind, and you know what? Those doubts made him upset. And you know what? Maybe he needs to have the whole ship just entirely refitted, but that would cost a lot of money. However, notice what it says here in terms of what he does. So this next part here talks about his attitude, and notice he changes his attitude despite those doubts that he had. It says he succeeded in overcoming these melancholy reflections. So he just put it to rest in his mind. He said to himself, you know what? It's made so many trips, so many voyages, weathered so many storms. It would be idle to suppose it wouldn't come home from this trip also, making like an inductive claim there, right? It made this trip and this trip and this trip and this trip and this trip. It's made all its trips. Why wouldn't it make this next trip? And it says he would put his trust in Providence, which is a notion about the will of God, that everything will kind of work out in the end. So I'm just going to trust in that notion. Everything's going to be okay. All these families are leaving to get better lives anyway. How could that possibly go wrong? Because it's for a good cause. And so notice this next line here, in the second half of what I have highlighted, this right here. He would dismiss from his mind all ungenerous suspicions about the honesty of builders and contractors. So any doubts that he might have had of people even working on repairs and things like that, no, I'm just going to forget about that right now. I don't need to worry about it. If I worry about it, that will mess with my own head, my own thoughts. I just don't need to think about it. In such ways, he acquired a sincere and comfortable conviction. So he means this. Notice it. It's sincere and comfortable. Everything's going to be okay. It's safe. It's seaworthy. He watched her departure with a light heart. He's not nervous. He's not anxious. and benevolent wishes for the success of the exiles in their strange new home that was to be. He actually wishes them the best. He's not planning to do anything malevolent. Now notice the next line says he got his insurance money when she went down in mid-ocean and told no tales. That final line of the paragraph. But according to the previous sentence, what's not going on in the story is it's not like Nancy Drew or Encyclopedia Brown, like a plot like that where he was planning to get the insurance money all along. So he planned this and planned some, error to happen at sea. No, he actually wished them well. He thought everything was going to be fine, but it wasn't fine. And so the issue here is not that he got the insurance money. That just happened, but he meant them well. He had great intentions. Yeah, he had some doubts. The question that we come to then in the second paragraph is, what do we do with this? So let's take a look now at the second paragraph and see what we think about this. What Clifford says. What shall we say of him, the owner of the ship? Surely this. So here's what Clifford says we should think about the owner of the ship. That he was verily guilty of the death of those men, the immigrants on the ship, crew as well. What Clifford's saying is the owner of the ship is responsible for their deaths. Now think back to what we mean when we're talking about notions of responsibility. It is admitted that he did sincerely believe in the soundness of his ship. His beliefs were sincere. The sincerity is not the problem. The sincerity is not the issue, as it says here. Well, that won't help him. Because, and notice Clifford puts italics here for emphasis, he had no right to believe on such evidence as was before him. Now, this is intriguing. Now, this comes back to talking about rights ethics, positive rights, negative rights, like what rights do we have? Remember, so with negative rights, those are the rights you're born with, so to speak, that you've just got naturally, whether they've been endowed by a creator or they're simply embedded in nature. Those rights are there. Positive rights are those that are given to you by some kind of institution, whether it be a state or a university or what have you. But notice, this is not talking about a right to arms or a right to life or even a right to speech. This is a right to believe something. And look what Clifford says here very clearly. This man, this owner of the ship, had no right to believe what he believed. The ship is fine to sail. Based on the evidence he had. He had no right to come to that conclusion. He continues. He had acquired his belief not by honestly earning it in patient investigation, but by stifling his doubts. And although in the end he may have felt so sure about it that he could not think otherwise, yet inasmuch as he had knowingly and willingly worked himself into that frame of mind, he must be held responsible for it. In short, he did not earn the belief that he had. Let's alter the case a little and suppose that the ship was not unsound after all, that she made her voyage safely and many others after it. We were talking about the ship going down. Okay, the owner is responsible. What if the ship didn't go down? What if it made it safely across the ocean? Oh, there we go. Now he's not guilty. He didn't kill anybody. Or at least he's not responsible for their deaths. And even made more trips afterwards. Everything fine. Will that diminish the guilt of the owner? Not one jot. When an action is once done, it is right or wrong forever. No accidental failure of its good or evil fruits can possibly alter that. This should tell you right now that this is not merely a consequentialist or utilitarian ethic. The utilitarian might say here, nobody died, everything's fine. But there's a notion of duty here embedded, and also a notion of virtue, perhaps, as well. The man would not have been innocent, he would only have been not found out. If the ship actually made successful trips, it's not as though he's not responsible for being negligent. He just didn't get caught because it just so happened that his negligence wasn't found out because it didn't actually sink. The question of right or wrong has to do with the origin of his belief, not the matter of it. Not what it was, but how he got it. Not whether it turned out to be true or false, but whether he had a right to believe on such evidence as was before him. Now notice what he said there too. Even if it turned out that everything was fine, too, the ship never went down. The evidence that he had did not get him there justifiably, and thus he had no right to believe what he believed on the evidence that he had. Clifford then transitions into this very different story in the fourth paragraph. There was once an island in which some of the inhabitants professed a religion, teaching neither the doctrine of original sin or that of eternal punishment. So he's telling us, imagine there's a place where there's a religion where that's not taught. But here's the rumor that gets around the rest of the world. A suspicion got abroad that these professors of this religion had made use of unfair means to get their doctrines taught to children. They were accused of wresting the laws of their country in such a way as to remove children from the care of their natural and legal guardians, and even of stealing them away and keeping them concealed from their friends and relations. So the practitioners of this religion are kidnapping kids from their parents, and not just kidnapping them, but actually changing the laws of the land in order to get kids away from their parents so as to inculcate the values of this new religion. Now, that's not what they're doing. That's the rumor that's getting around of what they're doing. And it says this: a certain number of men form themselves into a society for the purpose of agitating the public about this matter. So now like a group forms. We have to do something about these religious people stealing children, changing the laws. Mind you, this is all just a rumor, but now some kind of opposition forms about what's going on here. They published grave accusations against individual citizens of the highest position and character, saying, okay, these individuals are doing this and that, and did all in their power to injure these citizens in their exercise of their professions. So they're saying a bunch of stuff, making up all the stuff that they can to get people in power in trouble in some ways by making up grand accusations. So great was the noise that they made that a commission was appointed to investigate the facts. So, all right, finally the government gets together to do something about it. Okay, fine. We'll investigate what's going on here. But after the commission had carefully inquired into all the evidence that could be got, it appeared that the accused were innocent. The people of this religion are not stealing children. Not only had they been accused on insufficient evidence, but the evidence of their innocence was such as the agitators might have obtained it if they had attempted a fair inquiry. So it's not merely that the commission found out that these people were innocent of the crime that they were accused of, but anyone could have figured it out because the evidence was easily accessible to everyone. If the people who were making the accusations had just looked fairly at the evidence, they would have realized this. It didn't require some kind of special investigation to figure this out. After these disclosures, the inhabitants of that country looked upon the members of the agitated society not only as persons whose judgment was to be distrusted, but also no longer to be counted honorable men. So the people who had raised the fuss about it, hey, these people are stealing kids. These people were considered disreputable thereafter. And Clifford would say, and rightly so. Why? For although they had sincerely and conscientiously believed in the charges they had made. So here, it's not that they had made stuff up that they didn't believe. These people really believed, hey, the people of this religion are stealing children. We have to do something about it. They really believed it. It wasn't something that they were merely fabricating falsely in order for something to happen. The actual people agitating truly believed what they were pursuing. But, notice the italicized language here again. Yet, they had no right to believe on such evidence as was before them. Their sincere convictions, instead of being honestly earned by patient inquiring, were stolen by listening to the voice of prejudice and passion. These people had no right to believe what they believed. Notice the issue isn't the actions they took. The issue is the beliefs they had. They had no right to believe the way they believed. They had not earned those beliefs. You could almost think of it as there wasn't enough evidence to pay for the belief that they had. And actually, in the next paragraph, Clifford gives us the example of it turns out that the people really were stealing the kids. It turned out that they were right. And Clifford still says, that's not the point. The point is not, is the end result true or false or not? So look at this. In the next paragraph, he says, let us vary this case also and suppose other things remaining as before, that a still more accurate investigation proved the accused to have been really guilty. Would this make any difference in the guilt of the accusers? Clearly not. The question is not whether the belief was true or false, but whether they entertained it on the wrong grounds. You can be right for the wrong reasons. The issue is not that they were right about the facticity or the truthfulness of what was happening. That's not the issue. They didn't earn the belief. They didn't have the evidence to justify them getting there. Just like I can say 2 + 2 = 4, therefore the day after Sunday is Monday. Everything I said there is true, but the evidence that I provided, 2 + 2 = 4, does not get me to the day after Sunday is Monday. And I might make an argument and say, well, It's all true, though, so my reasoning must have been correct. And this is exactly what Clifford's saying. That doesn't get you there. You don't have the right to believe that based on the evidence you have. A little further down, then, he comes back to the first story. It may be said, however, that in both of these supposed cases, in both these stories, it's not the belief which is judged to be wrong, but the action following upon it. The ship owner might say, I'm perfectly certain that my ship is sound, but still I feel it is my duty to have her examined before trusting the lives of so many people to her. And it might be said to the agitator, however convinced you were of the justice of your cause and the truth of your convictions, you ought not to have made a public attack upon any man's character until you had examined the evidence on both sides with the utmost patience and care. All right, so let's say, okay, really the issue is the action that follows. You can have the belief, but you can't act on it until you have sufficient evidence. Now, he's not advocating this claim. He's just saying, for the sake of argument, let's entertain this. Let's say, okay, really the problem was not the belief, but the action following from it. Let's just say that, all right? So people want to believe that religious people are stealing children. The ship owner wanted to believe, yeah, I think it'll be fine. But you know what? Even though that's what I believe, I'm not going to do anything about it because I haven't really examined the evidence again. But I still believe that. He's saying, let's imagine that for a second. Is that okay? And he says in the following paragraph, in the first place, let's admit that so far as it goes, the view of the case is right and necessary. Right, because even when a man's belief is so fixed that he cannot think otherwise, he still has a choice in regard to the action suggested by it. Sure, and so cannot escape the duty of investigating it on the ground of the strength of his convictions, and necessary, because those who are not yet capable of controlling their feelings and thoughts must have a plain rule dealing with overt acts. But he's not done. So yeah, sure, it's noble even to, go, you know what, this is what I personally believe, but I'm not going to act on it because I haven't really examined everything enough yet. But it's still a feeling that I have in my gut. But this being premised is necessary. It becomes clear that it's not sufficient and that our previous judgment is required to supplement it. For it is not possible so to sever the belief from the action it suggests us to condemn the one without condemning the other. No man holding a strong belief on the side of a question, or even wishing to hold a belief on one side, can investigate it with such fairness and completeness as if he were really in doubt and unbiased. So that the existence of a belief not founded on fair inquiry unfits a man for the performance of its necessary duty. What Clifford is saying here is you can try and pretend to be as objective as you want when you make such a claim. Like, I already think this. Yeah, I really do think they're stealing people. But let's see where the evidence takes us. You're not really going to see where the evidence takes you. You've already committed yourself to a decision. So it's going to affect you. You can't really be objective if you've already come down with a supposition and hold a firm belief anyway. I believe this is happening. We'll see. It'll be revealed. No, that's a mistake. Further, he says that our beliefs affect us. And they actually affect our actions even if perhaps we're trying to be objective. He says this in this paragraph. Nor is it that truly a belief at all, which has not some influence upon the actions of him who holds it. He who truly believes that which prompts him to an action has looked upon the action to lust after it. He has committed it already in his heart. If a belief is not realized immediately in open deeds, it is stored up for the guidance of the future. It goes to make a part of that aggregate of beliefs which is the link between sensation and action at every moment of all our lives, and which is so organized and compacted together that no part of it can be isolated from the rest, but every new addition modifies the structure of the whole. If you truly hold a belief, it is going to affect your actions, no matter how much you try and keep it to yourself. No real belief, however trifling and fragmentary it may seem, is ever truly insignificant. It prepares us to receive more of its like, confirms those which resembled it before, and weakens others, and so gradually it lays a stealthy train in our inmost thoughts, which may someday explode into overt action and leave its stamp upon our character forever. Your beliefs affect you, your thoughts, and your actions, even if you try to keep them private. It affects what you do, what you think, and how you act. And it's not really as private as you think it is, as he tells us in the next paragraph. And no one man's belief is in any case a private matter which concerns himself alone. You might think, no, these are my beliefs, it's my private thoughts, it's really my business. It's your beliefs are not only your business, says Clifford. Our lives are guided by the general conception of the course of things which has been created by society for social purposes. You've heard the expression, we live in a society. Here it is. To quote the poetry of John Donne, no man is an island. What we do affects everyone in a kind of way. Our words, our phrases, our forms and processes and modes of thought are common property, fashioned and perfected from age to age, an heirloom which every succeeding generation inherits as a precious deposit and a sacred trust to be handed on to the next one. Not unchanged, but enlarged and purified, with some clear marks of its proper handiwork. Into this, for good or ill, is woven every belief of every man who has speech of his fellows. An awful privilege. That's awful in the sense of it should fill us with awe, not awful in the sense of nasty. But an awful privilege and an awful responsibility that we should help to create the world in which posterity will live. Even our private thoughts are all part of a whole, of like our collection of not just our individual cultures, but really human civilization as a whole. And we carry that on and pass it to the next generation. Your private beliefs will affect future generations, even if you don't have children, because you exist in a society and everything you do really affects everyone else. Even if you try and keep privately to yourself, those notions that you have, they will pervade. This is why he tells us in the next paragraph, but forasmuch as no belief held by one man, however seemingly trivial the belief and however obscure the believer, is ever actually insignificant or without its effect on the fate of mankind, we have no choice but to extend our judgment to all cases of belief whatever. So even if you think, oh, my opinions and my beliefs are kind of really optional matters, they don't really matter, they do, because they affect everyone. Your beliefs affect me. My beliefs affect you. Get it together, is what Clifford is telling us. And look at page 4, where he tells us this is not just the job of the philosopher to do this. This isn't some duty of intellectuals. It's not only the leader of men, statesman, philosopher, or poet that owes this bounden duty to mankind. Every rustic who delivers in the village alehouse his slow, infrequent sentences may help to kill or keep alive the fatal superstitions which clog his race. So the person, really right there, like the person that delivers beer kegs to a bar, and their small talk, what they say, like the rumors that they keep around, the superstitions that they have, that matters. Every hard-worked wife of an artisan may transmit to her children beliefs which shall knit society together or rend it in pieces. The stay-at-home mom who teaches her kids, what she teaches her kids matters to everyone. No simplicity of mind, no obscurity of station can escape the universal duty of questioning all that we believe. So now Clifford's brought this into play. He doesn't just say question these beliefs or those. All our beliefs should be questioned. He says there's a universal duty to do it. Do we have sufficient evidence to believe what we believe? And he says in the next couple of paragraphs that, yeah, this is not easy. This is a difficult task, but that is our responsibility. And finally on page 5, here's really his thesis. So he started with these stories to illustrate his thesis. Here's the point. He says this in summary here on page 5. To sum up, it is wrong, always, everywhere, and for anyone to believe anything upon insufficient evidence. Is it ever right for someone to believe something that they shouldn't believe based if they don't have enough evidence? Like, I kind of think this. No. He goes on in the following paragraph. If a man holding a belief he was taught in childhood or persuaded of afterwards, so maybe it's something you grew up learning, something you learned a little bit later, keeps down and pushes away any doubts. Maybe that's not true. And you just go, no, I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think that this might not be true. I've got my beliefs. I grew up this way. I turned out fine. You push away all the doubts that arise about it in the mind. You purposefully avoid the reading of books and the company of men that calls into question or discuss it. I don't want to think about it. I just believe it. That settles it. Now, here he's got reading of books. You don't do your research. You're not just reading anything. Like, you don't read legitimate research on the issue. You don't really talk or discuss about this with reputable people. And regards as impious those questions which cannot be easily asked without disturbing it. Yeah, it just bothers me to think about it, so I just try not to think about it. The life of that man is one long sin against mankind. Notice there, not sin against God, sin against mankind. The person that goes around unquestioningly living the unexamined life, that person does a disservice, even a kind of injury, to all of humanity. And then on page 6, when we get into part 2, the weight of authority, he says, wait, does this seem pretty heavy? Does this seem like it's a bit much? Are we then to become universal skeptics, doubting everything, afraid to always put one foot before the other until we have personally tested the firmness of the road? Are we to deprive ourselves of the help and guidance of that vast body of knowledge which is daily growing upon the world, because neither we nor any other one person can possibly test 100th part of it by immediate experiment or observation, and because it would not be completely proved if we did? Shall we steal and tell lies because we have no personal experience wide enough to justify the belief that it's wrong to do so? So if we went into super doubt mode, how can we know that when I put my foot on the floor, my feet aren't going to go through it? Okay, what reason do I have to believe that? Oh, well, it's happened before. Well, how do I know that's actually sufficient evidence? Someone might become like a hyper-skeptic. How do we not just doubt everything? And what he says here is this, like, look, nothing bad's going to happen from really taking care to question our beliefs. If that seems like hard work, maybe it is. But it's not like, oh, that's too hard, that's too difficult. Look, there is no practical danger that such consequences will ever follow from a scrupulous care and self-control in the matter of belief. You think about this stuff hard, oh, that's really difficult. Yeah, it is. And that's Clifford's take on it here. The next sections I'm going to summarize because it's not really at the crux of what we're looking at. But he says there's some beliefs about like the physical world and also about basic practical matters of ethics. So let's say something like the external world exists. Like there's a physical reality. I have hands. You can believe that stuff. And there's some basic moral principles that we've agreed upon that we can say, yeah, those are more definite than others. So things like murder is wrong. That stuff, sure. And he would still say there, you could really go about being very skeptical of those things too. It's never a bad thing to be really inquisitive and to question everything, because he says question everything. But there are some things that, upon questioning, you'll get to. Things like murder is wrong, and the physical world exists. I'm oversimplifying what he says there, but you can read it for yourself, but that's not really the focus of what I want to say here. I'll just say, he says, there's some basic things that you'll get to, that even if you question everything, there's some basic conclusions that you'll get to. You can still doubt them, but you'll probably come to the conclusion. And so what this means, too, is that there's some assumptions that we can have. They can't really be presumptions, but once we do some inquiry, there's some assumptions that we can then agree upon about things like morality, some things about morality and some things about nature. One of the things he's really big on about nature is the notion of the uniformity of nature. So I'm on page 10 here now, but he talks about this uniformity of nature. What that just means is that we can assume, for the sake of argument, that the universe always functions in the same kind of way. The speed of light in a vacuum is the same 5 billion years ago as it is now, as it will be 5 trillion years from now. Gravity will always still work in the same way. Those kinds of things don't change. The universe always works in the same kind of way. That's not to say that things don't change in the universe, but the basic laws of physics, as we understand them, don't change. Now, that doesn't negate anything about quantum physics, where things just function differently in quantum mechanics. Where things just function differently in quantum mechanics than they do, say, in conventional mechanics. That's to say, pretty much, nature follows the rules once we understand what the rules are. Which is why scientists can make predictions about things way in the future, and can say substantive things about the whole universe, because we're assuming the uniformity of nature. That's at least an assumption. We have no reason to think that's not true, says Clifford. So, he says this, we may then add to our experience on the assumption of the uniformity of nature. We may fill our picture of what is and has been, as experience gives it us, in such a way as to make the whole consistent with this uniformity. So here's what we can do. We can have this assumption. The universe works this basic way. Newtonian mechanics. Okay, remember those Newton's laws of motion: an object at rest remains at rest unless acted upon by an external force. Force is mass times acceleration. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. You can take that to be true. Now we can add some Einsteinian relativity updates to that as well, which explains things like the orbit of Mercury and Uranus and stuff like that. Okay, so basically we've got a Newtonian, Einsteinian hybrid of, say, celestial mechanics to explain physics. So assume things work that way. Nature basically works the same way all the time, in every place, in all instances. Don't go against that. That's why he says, here, no evidence, therefore, can justify us in believing the truth of a statement which is contrary to or outside of the uniformity of nature. Well, that's not what happened. The Earth is not billions of years old because time flowed differently then. Frankly, for the sake of argument, Clifford wouldn't say this. Maybe it did. But we have no reason to believe that because we assume the uniformity of nature. And he even says, like, look, in the next paragraph, therefore, do we have to believe that nature is absolutely and universally uniform? No, we don't have to do that. The rule only tells us that in forming beliefs which go beyond our experience, we may make the assumption that nature is practically uniform so far as we're concerned. Maybe it's not actually uniform. Maybe maybe time does change. Maybe the speed of light in a vacuum is altered over time. But based on the evidence we've got now, we have no reason to believe that. Insofar as we're aware, nature, the universe, is uniform in terms of how it functions. Again, maybe it's not. And this is a lot of what Clifford is saying. Like, it's not that the beliefs that we hold are true or false, and that's what makes them good or bad. It's that, do you have enough evidence to believe what you believe? Here, for the uniformity of nature, you kind of have to assume it. We have no good reasons to go against it. Which doesn't maintain that it's absolutely true itself. Which surely is a little bit confusing, but he can say we at least have to assume this to do our kind of everyday science. This is the problem with, say, like, flat Earth theory. Like, sure, maybe the Earth is flat. For the sake of argument, maybe it is. But presuming that, you have to do a lot of work to invest in that belief. Okay, like Australia can't exist, and all the governments have to be working together to maintain that ice shield so we don't fall off onto the back of the giant turtle. You don't really have enough evidence to believe that. You can say it, again, it doesn't mean that it's false. Maybe we really are on a flat disc on the back of a turtle, floating in the void. Maybe that's actually true. But there is no sufficient evidence to believe it, even if it is. Which makes the belief wrong. So you can believe the right thing for the wrong reasons and be in error for doing so. So that's why he says here at the end, to sum up, we may believe what goes beyond our experience only when it is inferred from that experience by the assumption that what we do not know is like what we know. This is why we can make claims about antimatter, dark energy, things about the universe which we have no direct experience. We may believe the statement of another person when there is reasonable ground for supposing that he knows the matter of which he speaks, and that he is speaking the truth so far as he knows it. So the person spreading conspiracy theories, should they be? Do you have grounds to believe them as an authority on a particular subject? When someone's speaking about something, are they authoritative in that area? That gives them more credence. It doesn't mean that they're necessarily right or wrong. That's a fallacy too. To say just because somebody's an expert in something, they must be right. They must be. But it should give us a bit more credence. But that doesn't mean that anyone's infallible. And finally, he says this again. This is the main refrain of this piece. It is wrong in all cases to believe on insufficient evidence. So it's always wrong to believe, remember, for anyone, at any time, in any place, to believe something without enough evidence to get you there. So what's the application here? Well, I think when it comes to engineering, let's take infrastructure, for example. There's a lot of infrastructure in this country, bridges, roads that are falling apart. And to just make a claim like, yeah, things look bad, like this bridge here, it looks like it's pretty rough. But you know what? It's worked so far. It's worked for years. I think it'll hold together. God willing, it'll hold together. You know, there's no way that God, and it need not be a theist saying this, like someone might make the claim like, there is no way that the universe would allow such tragedy to happen. Yeah, having just the conviction that that's the case doesn't make it so. And that, therefore, is an injurious belief. It will cause harm, and it's harmful even if the bridge never fails, assuming that it actually is in disrepair of some kind. If one is an engineer, that should invoke one to action and responsibility. So Clifford tells us there is a stern duty, and this isn't just for engineers, this is for everyone. Does everybody do this? No way. But that's where the duty lies. The duty lies in every person to do this. But here, I think, engineers have a particular kind of responsibility, because much of the construction here is, since it's for the public and for society and relies on a kind of public trust, there's a way that what engineers do are more at the brunt of this than others. You could be talking about medical engineering or various kinds of computer engineering as well. Like in medical engineering, like right now, obviously when this class is being held, part of the reason why this class is accessible online right now is because of stuff that's happened with COVID over the last year, right? Here we are a year deep into it. The vaccine's available now. Okay, there are different vaccines available out right now. But, you know, we've seen over the past year all kinds of information, misinformation, and disinformation promulgated in society at large, especially through social media. We've got stuff going on in medicine. I've heard instances about, you know, some people dumping versions of the vaccine, and not enough of the vaccine has been available. They're trying to figure out who gets to have the vaccine, who's a priority, also what's allowed to be posted about the vaccine on social media, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, what have you. All kinds of information being promulgated. This has everything to do with engineering. Should the people at Facebook be allowed to censor information, or should they not? That's a decision they have to make. Not just the people at Facebook, should people on Facebook, should they be posting stuff without evidence? Because I've seen a lot of precisely that. And I'm sure you have too. And then sometimes, something will pop up and say, oh, this piece of information has been fact-checked and some of it's dubious. So here, like when talking about this stuff, we've got stuff going on with the online credibility, the credibility of people in government, the credibility of people in medicine, and then the credibility of businesses as well. Because the various vaccines, Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Moderna, these are not non-profit organizations either. And then we could talk about notions of, they haven't been FDA approved. Should that cause us to doubt the efficacy of these vaccines as well? And what does that mean? And really, what does the FDA do? All those kinds of things. Is it going to involve the implantation of some sort of monitoring chip? Was COVID actually created in a Chinese lab? Was COVID actually caused by 5G technology? All these kinds of, and I'll go ahead and say it here, all those kinds of ridiculous beliefs and claims that were made, we find pervasive. But why are they pervasive? Because they spread, too. They don't happen in a vacuum. Someone might have a private belief, but those private beliefs got public at some point, didn't they? You know what? I think it was this, and I think it was that. And then we've seen false information spread like wildfire. And then people take even the most ridiculous beliefs as givens. Yep, this is true. On what grounds? Because it is. To the point where it's considered obviously certain, apodictically certain. There's no way it could be doubted. It's incontrovertible. Why? Because it is. So consider, Clifford says, we ought not believe anything without sufficient evidence. And you're going to have questions about this on the final exam, for sure. However, what I'm going to do in our next video is we're going to take a look at a response piece by William James that was written far, far later. So this piece that we just read came out in 1877. So we're going to look at a piece by William James that came out a bit later that addresses the intensity of what Clifford just said. So ought we really never, ever believe anything without sufficient evidence? That seems like a big deal. It seems like it's important. And when you hear Clifford, it seems there's a weight to that where really, after reading it, you kind of have to go, yeah, we do. Then we'll take a look at William James, where William James says, yeah, but really, though, should you never really believe anything without sufficient evidence? Does it need to be that strict? And James will talk about the way that we come to beliefs, too. And James is going to have some significant disagreement here with Clifford. And once we take a look at James, I want to think about these two pieces in conjunction with one another, and then we'll take a look at a little bit of what Harry Frankfurt says too. That's it for this video. In the next one, we'll take a look at a little bit of William James and a little bit of Harry Frankfurt.